November 24th, 1971. The evening just before the Thanksgiving festival. Portland International Airport, America. Northwest Orient Airlines Flight 305 is ready to depart for Seattle. Passengers are returning home to spend the holidays with their families. This was a golden age of American aviation, but at the same time, it was also a dark era of aerial hijacking or skyjacking. Yet, none of the passengers on this flight could have imagined that they were about to witness one of history's most legendary crimes. Among the boarding passengers was a middle-aged, 40-plus gentleman with a calm appearance, wearing a suit. He had purchased his ticket under the name Dan Cooper. Shortly after the plane took off, Cooper handed a note to a flight attendant, Florence Schaffner. Florence initially thought the man was perhaps trying to give her his phone number. So she put the note in her purse without reading it. But the man leaned toward her and said in a calm yet firm voice, "Miss, you should look at that note. I have a bomb." The next few hours unfolded into the most daring and mysterious hijacking event in American aviation history. But who was this D.B. Cooper? And how did he jump from a moving plane with ransom money and vanish forever? In today's episode, we will know the ins and outs of that legendary tale of America's only unsolved plane hijacking. There was no way to tell by looking at Dan Cooper that he was about to hijack a plane. He was wearing a black business suit, a white shirt, and a black clip-on tie. His behavior was incredibly calm and professional, which set him completely apart from other hijackers of that time. When Florence Schaffner read his note, she froze in fear. The note clearly stated that he had a bomb in his briefcase, and he wanted Florence to sit next to him. After Florence sat beside him, Cooper opened his briefcase slightly to show her 8 red cylinders inside that looked like dynamite, a large battery, and a tangle of wires. There was no way to prove if the bomb was real, but there was no question of taking a risk. Then Cooper stated his demands clearly. Cooper's behavior and his demands shocked the FBI and airline authorities. He was speaking extremely politely. He ordered a bourbon and soda and even offered to pay for it. There was no sign of excitement or fear in his speech. Rather, his instructions were extremely specific. Investigators thought a lot about why he wanted 4 parachutes. A popular theory is that he wanted to ensure authorities wouldn't give him faulty parachutes, because they would think Cooper might take a crew member along as a hostage to jump. It was an extraordinary psychological move. As per Cooper's instruction, the plane's pilot, Captain William Scott, informed air traffic control about the hijacking. From then on, the entire incident went under FBI control. Northwest Orient Airlines President Donald Nyrop immediately decided to pay the ransom, because he didn't want to take any risks with the lives of 36 passengers. The FBI then faced a tough challenge. They had to gather 10,000 $20 notes in a very short time, most of which were drawn from various banks in the Seattle area. They recorded the serial number of every note on microfilm cameras so the money could be tracked later. While this whole process was ongoing, Flight 305 kept circling the skies over Puget Sound, Seattle, for about 2 hours. The passengers still didn't know their plane had been hijacked. They were told that landing was delayed due to mechanical trouble. Cooper was so calm that none of the passengers suspected anything unusual. Finally, at 5:39 p.m., the plane landed at Seattle-Tacoma International Airport. Cooper ordered the plane to be taken to a secluded and brightly lit spot on the runway. There, an employee of Northwest Orient brought a nylon bag full of money and the parachutes onto the plane. After receiving the money and parachutes, Cooper kept his word. He released the 36 passengers and 2 flight attendants, including Florence Schaffner. Only the pilot, co-pilot, a flight engineer, 1 flight attendant named Tina Mucklow, and Dan Cooper himself remained on the plane. After refueling for about 2.5 hours in Seattle, Cooper told the pilot his new and final plan. His instructions were even more surprising and proved that he was no ordinary criminal. He had deep knowledge of aircraft and aerodynamics. His flight plan was to fly him toward Mexico City. However, there would be a stop for refueling in Reno, Nevada. The plane had to fly below 10,000 feet and at a speed of less than 200 knots, or about 370 kilometers per hour. Along with that, the landing gear had to remain down. The wing flaps had to be set at 15 degrees, and the cabin air pressure had to be kept normal. All of these were ideal and safe conditions for jumping with a parachute from a commercial jetliner like a Boeing 727. Jumping at high speed and high altitude could tear the human body apart due to air pressure. However, the most important instruction was regarding the rear stairs or aft stairs of the plane. The Boeing 727 had a staircase at the back used for passengers to board and disembark from the ground. Cooper ordered that these stairs remain lowered after takeoff. This was his master plan for escape. No hijacker had used this vulnerability before. At approximately 7:40 p.m., Flight 305 took off again from Seattle. This time its destination was an uncertain future. The U.S. Air Force sent 2 F-106 fighter jets to follow the plane. But as per Cooper's instructions, the plane was flying so low and slow that the fighter jets couldn't safely get very close in the darkness of the night. They didn't even see Cooper jump. While the plane was midway between Seattle and Reno, Cooper told the last remaining flight attendant in the cabin, Tina Mucklow, to go to the cockpit and close the door. The crew in the cockpit were then alone, and they had no way of understanding exactly what was happening in the back. Just after 8:01 p.m., a warning light flashed in the cockpit, which indicated that the rear stairs had been deployed. Then, at 8:13 p.m., while flying over the dense dark forests of southwest Washington, the tail section of the plane suddenly pitched up slightly. The pilots realized a heavy object had detached from the plane. Dan Cooper had jumped from 10,000 feet into the pitch-black deep night, into -7 degrees Celsius, cold and stormy winds, with a bag containing $200,000 and 2 parachutes. The plane continued to fly for about 2 hours. At 10:15 p.m., the plane landed safely at Reno Airport in Nevada. FBI agents surrounded the plane with guns and entered inside. But what they found was an empty cabin, Cooper's abandoned black clip-on tie, and 2 parachutes. D.B. Cooper had vanished. Then began one of the longest and most expensive investigations in FBI history, whose code name was Norjak. FBI agents, U.S. soldiers, and hundreds of volunteers carried out a comb search in those vast and rugged forests of Washington and Oregon. But they found no sign of Cooper, his parachute, or any part of the money bag. In the first 5 years alone, the FBI interrogated over 800 suspects, but no solid evidence was found against anyone. The name D.B. Cooper was actually a media mistake. The hijacker had given his name as Dan Cooper. But immediately after the incident, police questioned a man named D.B. Cooper in Portland, and a reporter mistakenly published that name. Since then, the name D.B. Cooper turned into a legend. Researchers have conducted research for decades on whatever Cooper left behind on the plane. Although a partial DNA profile was later obtained from his left-behind tie, it did not match any suspects. However, some rare titanium particles were found on the tie, from which it is surmised that Cooper perhaps worked at an aerospace or chemical factory like Boeing at that time. As a reaction to this one crime of his, the Federal Aviation Administration ordered a special device, or Cooper vane, to be installed on all Boeing 727 aircraft, which was to prevent the rear stairs from being lowered while in flight. When the investigation was nearly stagnant after years, A surprising event occurred in February 1980. At a place called Tina Bar in Washington, an 8-year-old boy, Brian Ingram, while playing in the sand on the banks of the Columbia River, found 3 bundles of money buried underground. Those were $20 notes. Upon receiving the news, the FBI arrived there. After matching the serial numbers of the notes, they confirmed that this was the money given to D.B. Cooper was ransomed 9 years ago. But the discovery birthed new questions instead of solving the mystery. The money was about 20 miles away from Cooper's probable jump zone. But how did they get here? Did Cooper lose a part of the money while jumping? Or did he survive and bury the money here later? Or did the river currents float the bundles here over several years? Researching a type of algae called diatoms on the money, researchers surmised that the money likely floated in the river, but no final conclusion could be reached. The biggest mystery is that not a single note of the remaining $195 to $200 was ever found again. Over the past 50 years, numerous theories and suspects' names have come up. Among them, a few are particularly notable, like Richard McCoy Jr. He was a Vietnam War soldier and skydiver. Just a few months after Cooper's incident, he hijacked a plane in almost the exact same method. However, he was caught and sent to jail. But he always denied being D.B. Cooper. A man named Dwayne Weber, before his death, confessed to his wife saying, "I am Dan Cooper." The FBI investigated his past and DNA, but found no conclusive proof. Meanwhile, the niece of a man named L.D. Cooper claimed that the day right after the hijacking, her uncle came to their house injured and battered. He claimed he was injured in a parachuting accident. Although his physical build and knowledge matched Cooper, there was no direct evidence. Also on the suspect list was Robert Rackstraw, a Vietnam War pilot and explosives expert. The FBI kept him under surveillance as a suspect for a long time, but it was not possible to file any case against him either. However, the FBI and many experts believed that the chances of Cooper surviving that day were near zero. He had jumped into an unfamiliar rugged forest in the dark of night amidst a fierce storm. He was wearing a plain business suit and loafer shoes, which were completely unsuitable for that cold. Many think he perhaps died during the jump itself, or couldn't survive fighting nature after landing on the ground. In 2016, after running the investigation for nearly 45 years, the FBI officially closed the D.B. Cooper case. They stated that it was no longer possible to spend money and time on this case. However, if any tangible evidence like a parachute or money is found in the future, they will reopen the investigation. D.B. Cooper's story is not just a tale of an unsolved crime. It is a mixture of courage, audacity, and mystery that has turned him into a legendary character of American folklore. In the era of the Vietnam War and Watergate scandal, when people's trust in the government was at rock bottom, Cooper turned into an anti-hero or rebel hero to many. The common man who managed to escape by fooling the entire system alone. Was he a genius criminal who managed to escape after committing a perfect crime? Or a foolish person who died trying a daring attempt? Until any final proof is found, D.B. Cooper will live on in human imagination, conspiracy theories, and as the biggest unsolved mystery in American history.